My brother married my ex-wife, and the whole family applauded. That's not a figure of speech, not a dream, not an exaggerated metaphor. It's the twisted, humiliating truth that shattered whatever illusions I still had about love, loyalty, and family. And maybe the worst part wasn't that they betrayed me. It was that everyone else stood up, clapped their hands, and celebrated like it was the happiest day of their lives. I should back up, if only so you can understand the weight of what happened. My name is Daniel. I'm 36 years old. I used to be the kind of man people described as dependable, steady, predictable, in the best way. I worked as a financial analyst for a mid-sized firm in the city. Nothing glamorous, but it paid well and kept food on the table. I wasn't rich, but I was comfortable. I had a wife, Sophia, and a younger brother, Ethan, who I always thought of as my best friend. We grew up together in a house that wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Our parents, strict but loving, always preached that family comes first, no matter what. And for most of my life, I believed them. When Sophia and I married, Ethan was the one who gave the best man speech. I remember him standing there, a little nervous but smiling, telling everyone how I'd always looked out for him when we were kids, how I was the steady one, the protector. "If anyone deserves happiness, it's my brother," he said that night, and I believed him. Back then, I thought he meant it. For a while, life was good. Sophia was beautiful, smart, elegant, the kind of woman who could silence a room just by walking in. And she was mine. At least, that's what I told myself every day. We had what I thought was a happy marriage. We didn't have kids, but we had plans. Trips we'd take, a house we'd one day buy, a future we'd build together. Ethan visited often, and Sophia always welcomed him warmly. Maybe a little too warmly, if I'm being honest. But back then, I never questioned it. She laughed at his jokes, he helped her with odd things around the house, and I was proud that the two most important people in my life got along so well. But then came the little cracks, the ones you almost don't see at first. Sophia started working late. At first, it was once in a while, then a few nights a week. She'd come home tired, claiming meetings had run long, or that she'd gone out with colleagues for a quick drink. I wanted to believe her, and for a long time I did. She'd set her phone face down on the table, claiming she didn't want to be distracted, and I thought that was thoughtful. Now, I know it was deliberate. Ethan, meanwhile, was always around, always ready to help Sophia with things I couldn't, fixing a leaky faucet, driving her when her car was in the shop, even helping her pick out new furniture. My mother used to say, "Isn't it wonderful how close Ethan and Sophia are? Not every family has that." And I would smile, ignoring the strange knot forming in my stomach. The real seed of tragedy came one night when Sophia was out late again. I was sitting on the couch, flipping through channels, when her phone buzzed on the coffee table. I don't know why she left it there. It was unusual. The message flashed across the screen just long enough for me to read it. "Can't wait until he finds out. Until then, we play our roles. I love you." My chest went cold, my hands numb. At first, I thought maybe it's a mistake. Maybe she's in some group chat. Maybe it's not what it looks like. But the sinking feeling told me the truth before my brain could catch up. When she came home that night, I asked her casually about her evening. She smiled, kissed my cheek, and said she'd been with colleagues, going over quarterly reports. And as I looked into her eyes, I wondered how many lies had passed those lips I once kissed without hesitation. I wanted to scream, to demand answers right then, but something inside me stopped. A voice I can't quite explain told me to wait, to observe, to collect the truth piece by piece. If she thought I was ignorant, so be it. I would use that ignorance as my weapon. But the next day, the tragedy deepened. I overheard my mother on the phone. She was speaking in a hushed tone, her words sharp and giddy at the same time. I only caught fragments, but they were enough to twist the knife deeper. They'll make such a beautiful couple. Finally, where they belong. He deserves her more than Daniel ever did. I froze in the hallway, every word cutting into me. My own mother, my blood, speaking of my wife as if she was never mine at all. As if I was just a placeholder, a stepping stone for something they all believed was inevitable. I didn't reveal myself. I stood there in the shadows, heart pounding, throat dry, and realized I was surrounded by liars. Not just my wife, not just my brother, but my family. The people I trusted most were plotting my humiliation behind my back. That night, when I looked at Sophia, I no longer saw my wife. I saw a stranger sitting across from me at the dinner table, smiling, laughing, asking about my day as if nothing was wrong. And Ethan, when he texted me about grabbing a beer sometime soon, I stared at the message, bile rising in my throat. The betrayal wasn't complete yet, but I could feel it looming, heavy and inevitable, like a storm building on the horizon. And as much as I wanted to shut my eyes and pretend none of it was happening, I knew the first blow had already landed. I just didn't know then how deep it would cut. And the worst part? She wasn't even subtle anymore. It was as if she knew I wouldn't question her, as if she was daring me to. I began to notice the absences. At first, they were disguised as late nights at work. Then they became dinners with friends I'd never met, colleagues I couldn't confirm existed, and family errands that lasted far longer than they should. She always had an excuse, always a polished explanation. But my gut told me the truth. Those excuses were nothing more than carefully constructed lies. And Ethan, my brother, he was around more than ever. He'd swing by under the guise of helping with repairs, bringing takeout, or just checking in. Sometimes, when he arrived, Sophia would suddenly emerge from the bedroom, cheeks flushed, hair suspiciously tousled, claiming she had been resting. I wanted to believe the best. God help me, I wanted to. But the image of that message can't wait until he finds out. Until then, we play our roles, was seared into my brain like fire. It wasn't just the distance with Sophia, it was the silence between us. We no longer laughed the way we used to. Our conversations were reduced to functional exchanges. What's for dinner? When's the next bill due? Did you feed the dog? The intimacy that once tethered us together had unraveled into thin, fragile threads that snapped whenever I tried to pull us closer. I started to pay attention to the details, little slips, little cracks in her perfect lies. One night, she called me by the wrong name. Not Daniel, but Ethan. She brushed it off quickly, laughing, saying she was tired, but the damage was done. Another time, I noticed she smiled at her phone, a smile so private, so intimate, that I knew it couldn't have been for me. Every day was a war between my heart and my mind. My heart still wanted to believe she loved me, that she was the woman I married, the woman I trusted with everything. But my mind, sharp and cruel, replayed every inconsistency, every late night, every glance at her phone. The doubt was eating me alive. I started losing sleep. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, listening to her steady breathing beside me, wondering if her dreams were filled with thoughts of him, of Ethan. The man who should have been my closest ally, the man who had stood by my side on my wedding day, was now haunting my marriage like a ghost. One evening, when she was in the shower, I finally gave in to temptation. Her handbag was lying on the dresser, and inside was a small stack of receipts.
At first, I told myself I was just curious, that I wasn't looking for anything in particular. But when I unfolded them, my heart stopped. Dinner receipts from restaurants I'd never been to, hotel charges from nights she claimed she'd been working late, and bar tabs for 2 when she told me she'd been out with coworkers. The dates aligned too neatly with the nights she hadn't come home until midnight, her eyes avoiding mine as she slipped into bed. I stared at those receipts, my hands shaking so violently that the paper crumpled in my fists. There it was, the evidence I thought I wanted. But in truth, it was the evidence I dreaded. It was no longer just suspicion, it was reality, printed in black and white. And yet, I didn't confront her, not yet. Because a twisted part of me still wanted more, still wanted undeniable proof that would crush her lies beneath their own weight. Still wanted to catch her in the act so she could never again look me in the eyes and tell me I was imagining things. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after she had gone to bed, the receipts spread out in front of me like fragments of a crime scene. My heart pounded with rage, betrayal, and an unbearable sadness that made my chest ache. And in that silence, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't be the fool who confronted too soon. I would watch, I would wait, and when the time came, I would expose them both. When I finally dragged myself to bed, Sophia stirred slightly, murmuring in her sleep. She reached for me, her hand brushing against my arm, and for a fleeting second, I almost gave in. But then I remembered the hotel receipts, the laughter I'd never heard, the smiles she never gave me anymore. And I lay there, stiff and hollow, next to a woman I no longer recognized. The doubt wasn't just a whisper anymore, it was a scream. And deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before the truth shattered everything. The next few weeks felt like living in a waking nightmare. The receipts burned in my pocket every time Sophia walked past me with that forced, practiced smile. I carried them like secret weapons, but instead of bringing me power, they poisoned me. Every glance, every laugh, every casual touch between her and Ethan now reeked of betrayal. The signs grew bolder. Sophia stopped trying to hide her late nights. She'd announce she had work dinners, saying it with a sharpness that dared me to question her. And Ethan, my own blood, seemed to hover like a vulture. He'd show up at family gatherings and sit just a little too close to her, leaning in when he spoke, lowering his voice so only she could hear. Their eyes would meet across the room, a flicker too long, a spark too dangerous, and I felt myself unravel. I started keeping track, times, dates, excuses. I kept a journal hidden in my desk drawer, recording every detail, building a timeline of her deceit. It wasn't just paranoia, it was methodical, deliberate. If she wanted to play games, I'd play better. But paranoia has a way of twisting your soul. I couldn't concentrate at work. I'd catch myself staring at my phone, waiting for a message that would confirm my fears. My colleagues noticed my distraction, but I brushed them off. How could I explain that my entire world was cracking, piece by piece, and I was just holding the fragments, bleeding from the edges? Then came the first undeniable sign. One night, after she fell asleep, I crept downstairs to grab some water. Her phone, for once, wasn't under her pillow, but on the counter. My heart raced as I stared at it, torn between my desperate need for the truth and the knowledge that once I opened Pandora's box, I could never close it again. I picked it up. Her messages were locked, but the notifications weren't. And there it was, Ethan's name glowing on the screen, followed by words that nearly made me drop the phone. Last night was worth every risk. Can't wait for the next time. My breath caught in my throat, my hands went cold, my vision tunneled. It wasn't vague anymore, wasn't subtle, it was explicit.
My wife, my brother, together. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I set the phone back, my hands trembling, and stumbled upstairs, forcing myself into bed beside her. My heart pounded so hard, it felt like it might shatter my ribs. I stared at the ceiling, listening to her soft breathing, knowing those lips had whispered someone else's name just hours before. The next morning, I tried to act normal, but every word she spoke was acid in my ears. Every smile was a lie. And when Ethan showed up that evening, carrying a six-pack and grinning like nothing was wrong, I wanted to tear him apart. I invited him in, keeping my voice calm, steady, though inside I was screaming. He and Sophia exchanged a glance, so quick I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching. They thought they were clever. They thought I was blind. That night, I tested her. I asked her where she'd been the previous evening, already knowing the truth. She said she had stayed late at the office. Her tone was casual, dismissive, like it was beneath her to even justify herself. I nodded, pretending to accept it, even though her phone's glowing message still echoed in my mind like a curse. But I couldn't hold it in forever. One night, I snapped. I asked her directly if she was hiding something from me. The look on her face, God, I'll never forget it. She didn't flinch. She didn't stammer. She just tilted her head, narrowed her eyes, and said, "Are you accusing me of something?" I tried to explain my feelings, my suspicions, my unease. Instead of reassurance, she exploded. She accused me of being paranoid, insecure, controlling. She turned my doubts into weapons and used them against me. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. She had rehearsed this. She was ready for my suspicion, ready to flip it back on me. The fight escalated until she stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her, leaving me in silence so heavy it pressed on my chest like a stone. I sat there, shaking, knowing I'd lost the confrontation without even firing a shot. And the family, my own family, wasn't blind. They noticed the tension. But instead of supporting me, they seemed to close ranks around her. My mother would tell me, "Sophia is a wonderful wife. Don't ruin things with your jealousy." My father, usually distant, muttered once that I should man up and keep my marriage together. Even my sister defended her, saying I should be grateful to have a woman like Sophia by my side. They didn't see the cracks, or maybe they refused to. Maybe it was easier for them to believe that I was the problem, the paranoid husband unraveling under imaginary shadows. The isolation was worse than the betrayal itself. I felt trapped, surrounded by liars, doubted by my own blood. And Ethan, always, Ethan stood at the center of it all, calm and confident, smiling as if he owned not just my wife, but my family too. One night, after another argument that ended in her storming out, I sat in the dark, gripping those receipts, my journal, and the memory of that glowing message. My rage boiled over into resolve. Enough pretending, enough waiting. If they wanted to play this game in the shadows, I would drag them into the light. I decided then and there, I'd follow them. I'd catch them red-handed. No more subtle hints, no more vague suspicions. I would get the proof that would silence every denial, every excuse, every manipulation. And as I sat in the darkness, a grim clarity washed over me. I wasn't just a betrayed husband anymore.
I was a hunter, and they had no idea that the trap was already closing around them. The night I followed them, the city seemed to pulse with a rhythm I had never noticed before. Every streetlight felt like an accomplice, every shadow like a warning. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight they ached, but I couldn't let go. Not now, not when the truth was so close. Sophia had told me she was going out for drinks with coworkers. I nodded, smiling just enough to hide the venom in my chest, and watched as she slipped into a black dress that clung to her body like sin itself. She didn't dress like that for office drinks. She never did. And when she thought I wasn't looking, she checked her phone, a smile tugging at her lips. I waited 10 minutes after she left before I followed. My car trailed hers from a distance, my heart pounding harder with every turn. She wasn't heading downtown toward her office. No, she was driving toward the edge of the city, where neon bars and cheap motels lined the highway like broken teeth. She parked outside a dimly lit restaurant, the kind of place where secrets were meant to stay buried. And then, like a dagger straight through my chest, Ethan appeared. He got out of his truck, walked straight toward her, and, without hesitation, without shame, pulled her into his arms. I couldn't breathe. My lungs refused to work. My heart refused to beat. I sat frozen in my car, watching as my wife and my brother kiss like two teenagers stealing moments behind the gym. It wasn't tentative. It wasn't uncertain. It was practiced, hungry, familiar. This wasn't their first time. It was a ritual. I gripped the steering wheel, every muscle in my body screaming at me to get out, to tear him off her, to scream until the whole world knew what they had done. But I stayed, because rage without proof is just madness, and I needed the world to see what I had seen. I watched them walk inside, hand in hand, like lovers, not conspirators. My vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. How long had this been going on? How many times had she left my bed only to crawl into his? My brother, my own flesh and blood, had become the thief of my life, and my family applauded his every move. I followed them inside, careful to keep my distance, slipping into a booth in the far corner. The restaurant was dim, the air thick with the smell of cheap liquor and frying oil. From where I sat, I had a perfect view of them. Ethan leaned in, whispering something that made her laugh. Her laugh, the one that used to belong to me, the one that once made my darkest days feel like sunlight. Now it was his. They ordered wine, their hands brushing across the table, lingering longer than any siblings-in-law should. Every glance between them was a confession, every touch a betrayal. I clenched my fists so hard, my nails cut into my palms, but the pain was nothing compared to the fire consuming me. Then Ethan reached across the table, his hand covering hers, and I heard him say the words that shattered the last fragments of my soul.
You won't have to hide much longer. Soon, it'll all be ours. Ours. Not hers, not his. Theirs. My wife, my brother. Their future. Their plan. My vision tunneled, the edges of the room dissolving into darkness. I wanted to leap from my seat, flip the table, and watch their lies collapse around them. But I forced myself to stay, to listen, to memorize every treacherous word. Sophia smiled at him then, a smile I hadn't seen in years, a smile she never gave me anymore. I just want it to be over. I can't keep lying to him. Over. Lying to me? She spoke as if I were already gone, as if my existence had been erased, as if I were nothing more than an obstacle standing in the way of their happily ever after. I stumbled out of the restaurant before my fury consumed me entirely. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but it wasn't enough to cool the inferno raging inside. I sat in my car, shaking, replaying their words, their touches, their smiles. It wasn't just an affair, it was a plan. They wanted more than stolen moments. They wanted everything. That night, when Sophia came home, I pretended to be asleep. I felt the mattress dip as she slid beside me, her perfume still heavy with the scent of him. My stomach churned, but I didn't move. She whispered something soft under her breath, words I couldn't quite make out. But I knew they weren't meant for me. The days that followed were a blur of rage and despair. I confronted her again, this time with more fire, but she turned it against me with practiced cruelty. She accused me of spying, of losing my mind, of destroying the trust in our marriage. And when I looked to my family for support, they sided with her. Ethan, damn him, played his part perfectly. He stood by me, hand on my shoulder, telling everyone I was just going through something. He painted me as unstable, paranoid, broken, and they believed him. They always believed him. I was the villain in my own story, cast out by the very people who should have stood beside me. My family became her shield, and together they turned my reality into a nightmare. But even cornered animals bite back, and I had seen enough. The restaurant, their words, their touch, it was all seared into my memory, undeniable, unshakable. One evening, while searching her purse for more proof, I found it. A receipt from that very restaurant. The date and time matched perfectly. Proof, tangible and undeniable. And as I held it in my trembling hands, a grim smile crept across my face. They thought they could outsmart me. They thought I was blind. But the truth was about to claw its way out of the shadows. And when it did, it would burn everything in its path. The trap was almost ready. The stage was almost set. And none of them, not Sophia, not Ethan, not my so-called family, had any idea that their lies were about to collapse in front of the world. I had rehearsed it 100 times in my head, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality of it. The night I decided to end the charade, the night I forced the truth into the light, I felt as though I were walking into battle. And in a way, I was. The proof sat in my pocket. The receipt from their secret dinner, the damning evidence of their betrayal. But proof on paper wasn't enough. I needed something undeniable, something that would rip the mask off their faces in front of everyone who had called me paranoid. The wedding. That cursed wedding. My brother Ethan and Sophia had decided to marry. My wife, only months before, was to stand at the altar with my brother while my family cheered them on. They didn't care about my pain. They didn't care about the humiliation. They told me to move on, to be happy for them. But how could I? How could I watch as the woman who destroyed me become part of the family again, celebrated as if she were some prize? I knew then. The wedding would be the stage.
and I would be the storm that tore it apart. The day arrived with cruel perfection. Sunlight spilled across the church, laughter echoed through the halls, and flowers bloomed in colors too bright for such a rotten occasion. Guests filled the pews, chattering excitedly, oblivious to the poison that pulsed beneath their smiles. My mother, radiant in her dress, fussed over Ethan like he was the golden boy she had always adored. My father clapped him on the back, pride swelling in his chest. And Sophia, she glowed like a queen, draped in white, as if purity hadn't abandoned her long ago. I sat near the back, silent, unseen, my rage coiled tight inside me. Every second felt like a hammer against my skull. Every smile, every laugh, every whispered blessing was a knife driven deeper into my flesh. And then it began. The music swelled, the guests rose, and Sophia walked down the aisle, her arm hooked through my brother's. My heart pounded so loud I thought the walls would crack. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a performance, a mockery of everything I had once held sacred. When the priest asked if anyone objected, the silence was suffocating. No one dared speak. No one dared break the illusion. And that was when I rose to my feet. The room stilled, heads turned, gasps rippled through the crowd as I walked down the aisle, each step heavy with fury. Ethan's face paled, Sophia's smile faltered, and my mother's hand flew to her chest. "I object," I said, my voice steady but sharp enough to cut glass. The priest stammered, uncertain, but I didn't give him time. I pulled the receipt from my pocket, holding it high for all to see. "This," I said, my voice rising, "is from the night they swore they were apart. The night she told me she was working late. The night he told you all I was losing my mind. They weren't at work. They weren't with friends. They were together, like they've been for months." Whispers erupted through the church, waves of shock crashing against the walls. Ethan stepped forward, his face twisted with anger. "This is insane," he spat. "You're pathetic, making a scene because you can't move on." But Sophia's eyes betrayed her, wide, glistening, trembling. Guilt poured from every corner of her being, and the crowd saw it. They saw the truth I had carried alone for so long. "Pathetic?" I laughed, but it was hollow, broken. "You stole my wife. You lied to me. You lied to all of us. And now you stand here, dressed in white, asking for blessings as if your hands aren't drenched in betrayal?" Sophia reached out, desperate to speak, but I recoiled. Don't you dare!" My voice cracked, but the fire inside didn't waver. "Do you remember, Sophia?"
That night at the restaurant? "You won't have to hide much longer," he said. "It'll all be ours. Yours, his, everything that used to be mine." The church fell silent. All eyes were on her now. Ethan's jaw tightened, his fists clenched, but the weight of my words crushed the air around him. And then the final dagger. "Tell them, Sophia. Tell them the truth about my daughter." Her face drained of color. She shook her head, lips trembling. But the silence screamed louder than words. My chest heaved as I forced the words out. "She's not mine, is she? She never was. All those years you let me raise her, love her, protect her, while you both laughed behind my back. You let me believe I was her father, when all along—" The crowd gasped.
My mother collapsed into a pew, sobbing. My father stood frozen, and Ethan's mask shattered. He stepped forward, shouting, "Enough! This has gone too far!" But his voice cracked, betraying him. The truth had erupted. The perfect wedding was ashes. The family that once applauded now stared in horror. Their golden son exposed as a thief. Their beloved Sophia revealed as a fraud. I turned then, my body trembling, but my voice strong. "You wanted a wedding? You wanted a celebration? Then let the world celebrate this, the truth you tried to bury." And with that, I walked out. The door slammed behind me, the sound echoing like thunder, leaving them in the ruins of the lies they had built. Outside, the sun still shone, cruel and indifferent. My chest ached with a hollow emptiness, but beneath it all, a grim satisfaction burned. I had nothing left, no wife, no daughter, no family. But I had exposed them. I had torn the mask away. They would never escape it. Not Ethan, not Sophia, not my so-called family. Their laughter, their applause, their joy, it had all been silenced. And though I walked alone into the blinding light of day, I carried with me the only victory left to claim. The truth. The doors of that church closed behind me with a thunderous slam, but the echoes inside didn't fade. They stayed alive, bouncing off the stained glass windows, shattering the illusion my family had tried so hard to maintain. And as I walked into the blinding daylight, I knew that nothing, not the wedding, not the carefully crafted lies, would ever recover from the truth I had unleashed. The silence didn't last long. Within hours, the family that once applauded Ethan and Sophia was split in two. Some still tried to cling to their fantasy, whispering excuses, blaming me for ruining the day. But the evidence was undeniable. The words had already left my mouth, and the look of guilt on Sophia's face had sealed their fate. I heard later that the ceremony never finished. The priest walked away, shaking his head in disgust. Guests hurried out, whispering viciously as they clutched their coats. Neighbors who had come out of respect left with stories to tell, tales that would spread faster than fire through dry grass. My family's golden wedding had turned into a public spectacle, a humiliation so grand it couldn't be swept under the rug. Ethan and Sophia tried to salvage it, of course. They shouted, they argued, they even tried to force smiles. But no one believed them anymore. The photos captured more than just a bride and groom. They captured the fear in Sophia's eyes, the anger in Ethan's face, the chaos I had unleashed. They couldn't Photoshop the truth. For me, the days that followed were heavy, but strangely liberating. I expected regret, maybe even sorrow, but what I felt was something darker, satisfaction. After months of gaslighting, betrayal, and humiliation, I had stripped them bare, and the world finally saw them for who they truly were. The fallout came swift. Ethan's career, something he had built with arrogance and pride, began to crumble. His colleagues whispered behind his back, clients pulled away, and promotions that once seemed guaranteed vanished like smoke. A man who thrived on image suddenly had no image left to protect him. He was a liar, a thief, a man who had taken what was not his and destroyed his own brother in the process. Sophia fared no better. She had dreamed of being welcomed into the family again, of being the adored daughter-in-law. Instead, she was branded as a homewrecker, a manipulator, the woman who had played both brothers against each other. Friends distanced themselves, neighbors sneered, and the very family that had clapped for her began to whisper about her behind closed doors. My mother couldn't even look her in the eye anymore, not after learning that the child she had believed to be her granddaughter wasn't truly mine. The shame was too much, and Sophia's carefully painted mask cracked with every passing day. And the child, my daughter, or rather, the child I had raised as my own. I wrestled with that truth more than anything else. She was innocent, untouched by the cruelty of her mother and uncle. I had loved her with every fiber of my being. And yet, every time I looked at her, I felt the knife twist deeper. She wasn't mine, not by blood, but by choice, by years of love and sacrifice. And still, that love felt poisoned now. In the weeks after the wedding, Ethan and Sophia tried to spin their own story. They told anyone who would listen that I had gone mad, that jealousy had consumed me, that I had fabricated evidence to destroy them. But people aren't blind. They had seen Sophia's silence. They had seen Ethan's panic. They had seen the truth. And no amount of desperate lies could cover the stench of betrayal that hung over them. One night, I received a call from my father. His voice, once so firm and certain, was tired, broken. "Maybe you were right," he said quietly. "Maybe we should have listened." But his words didn't comfort me. Where was his support when I was screaming for help? Where was his hand when I was drowning? Too little, too late. Their loyalty had been tested, and they had failed. I was no longer part of that family, not really. But here's the strange thing about karma. It doesn't come all at once. It trickles, slowly, painfully, dragging the guilty down step by step. Ethan lost his job within a month, not because of what I had said, but because the truth clung to him like rot. Clients pulled contracts, and suddenly, the man who had always stood above me was beneath me, scrambling for dignity in a world that no longer respected him. Sophia found herself ostracized, whispered about in every corner of town. Invitations to dinners disappeared, friends ghosted her, even relatives who once supported her kept their distance. She had gambled everything on Ethan, on the fantasy of becoming part of the family again, and she had lost. As for me, I was still broken. Don't mistake this for triumph. Betrayal doesn't vanish with revenge.
The nights were long, the silence unbearable. I had moments where I hated myself, hated that I had been blind, hated that I had allowed it all to happen. But little by little, I began to breathe again. I moved out of the city, away from the whispers, away from the shadow of that cursed family. I found work in a new town, simple and steady, and for the first time in months, I felt the faintest flicker of peace. Strangers didn't look at me with pity. No one called me paranoid. No one knew my story. I could just exist. But even as I tried to rebuild, karma kept working on its own. I didn't need to chase them. I didn't need to scream or fight anymore. Life itself was tearing them apart, piece by piece. And I'll admit, I took a grim satisfaction in hearing about their downfall from afar. Ethan unemployed, Sophia isolated. Their marriage, if you could call it that, filled with bitterness and blame instead of love. They had destroyed me, yes, but in the end, they destroyed themselves far worse. And so I let them. I let karma do what it does best. Still, in the quiet of the night, when memories creep in like shadows,
I can't help but wonder if the story is really over. Because betrayal leaves scars that don't heal cleanly. And sometimes, just when you think the wounds are closed, they bleed again. It has been years since that day. Years since the church doors slammed shut, since whispers of betrayal consumed every corner of my life. Time has a way of dulling certain wounds, but some scars never fade. They remain etched deep, not to hurt, but to remind. I no longer live in the same town. I left everything behind. The street where I grew up, the house where I once dreamed of raising a family, even the familiar faces that once greeted me with warmth, but later turned cold with judgment. At first, leaving felt like cowardice, like I was running from the battlefield. But I've learned that walking away isn't weakness, it's survival. In my new life, I found something precious: silence. No one here knows me as the man whose wife betrayed him with his brother. No one looks at me with pity or curiosity. I am just another man, living, working, breathing. For the first time, I wasn't defined by their lies. But even in silence, memories haunt. There are nights when I dream of Sophia's face, the way she smiled at me years ago, so convincing, so tender, that I believed she could never hurt me. I wake up drenched in sweat, realizing that love can be the cruelest disguise of all. And sometimes I hear Ethan's voice, my brother, my blood, mocking me in my dreams, reminding me that betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from the ones who sit at your table, the ones who share your name. I've heard stories of them, of course. I don't seek them out, but gossip has a way of traveling. Ethan never truly recovered from that day. His career died quietly, and with it, the arrogance he carried like armor. He works odd jobs now, scraping by, far from the man he once pretended to be. Sophia, too, has faded into the background. She is no longer the radiant woman who turned heads when she walked into a room. Instead, she is whispered about, pitied, and in many ways, forgotten. Together, they live not in glory, but in survival, their marriage poisoned with the very betrayal that once brought them together. And their child, the one I raised, the one I loved as my own, I sometimes wonder about her. She is older now, old enough to understand fragments of what happened. Does she hate me for leaving? Does she hate them for lying? Or has she built her own narrative, one that keeps her safe from the truth? I don't know, and maybe I never will. But I hope, God, I hope that she doesn't carry the sins of her parents like a burden on her shoulders. She deserved better than the mess we gave her. People often ask if revenge healed me. The answer is complicated. Standing in that church, exposing them in front of everyone, watching their world collapse, that moment was powerful, intoxicating. But it wasn't healing. Revenge doesn't stitch the wound closed. It doesn't give back the lost years, the broken trust, or the innocence stolen by lies. What it does is balance the scales, just enough so you can move forward without drowning in injustice. The real healing came later, in the quiet moments, when I learned to be alone without being lonely. When I realized that betrayal is not the end of my story, but a chapter in it. When I stopped asking, why me, and started telling myself, because I survived. I used to think family was sacred, untouchable. But I learned the hard way that blood is not loyalty, and loyalty is not guaranteed. Family is not defined by last names or shared DNA. It's defined by love, respect, and trust. Ethan and Sophia were never truly my family, not in the ways that mattered. Losing them wasn't losing blood. It was cutting out poison. Now I speak to you not as a man destroyed, but as a man rebuilt. If you take anything from my story, let it be this: betrayal will break you, but it will not define you. The ones who stab you in the back are already weaker than you, because betrayal is the weapon of cowards. The strong do not need deceit. They stand tall in truth. And if you find yourself where I once stood, facing lies, facing betrayal, remember this: patience is not weakness. Sometimes pretending to be blind, pretending to be ignorant, gives you the time you need to let the guilty expose themselves. Truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep it's buried. And when it does, the world will see them for who they are, without you having to scream. I don't forgive Ethan. I don't forgive Sophia. Some things are too deep to be forgiven. But I no longer hate them either. They are simply irrelevant. Their lives are their punishment. Their downfall is their karma. I don't need to watch them suffer. I already know they do. So I live, I breathe, I carry my scars, and I wear them with pride. Because they remind me of what I survived. And maybe, just maybe, one day I'll find someone who teaches me that love can heal as deeply as betrayal can wound. Until then, I move forward, one step, one day, one breath at a time. Because in the end, this story was never about them. It was about me, and it was about learning that sometimes the most powerful revenge is not destroying those who hurt you. It's becoming untouchable, unshakable, unstoppable, in spite of them. So, to anyone listening, don't let betrayal define your life.
Let it shape you. Let it strengthen you. But never let it own you. Walk away with your head high, knowing that you are worth more than their lies. That is my confession. That is my truth. And if you ever find yourself standing where I once stood, remember this: family is not who shares your blood. Family is who deserves your heart.